if you take a child that's 5 years old and you keep telling the child over and over and over that she's less than, she's gonna, after a while, she's gonna start believing that she's less than. You know, it's the same thing when you take a kid that's 18 years old and you send him to Green Correctional Facility or something like that, and you keep telling him that he's less than, that he's, you know, an inmate. You're gonna always be an inmate. You know, you're an F up, all of these things, you know, you keep telling them that over and over and over, especially, you know, that word inmate. You keep ingraining that into somebody's mind over and over and over and over. You know, it's like you filling up that tape again. You filling up that tape, you just wiping out everything else that he may believe and make him believe that he's less than.
I would like to introduce everybody. We have this is time and space limited, and many of you are first time here. We want you to come more often. This is lots of things we do relating to the community and formats that bring people together and to talk about, to talk and discuss issues that are oftentimes left untalked about. Many of the people in our community are, come on in. Friends, neighbors, many of the people to the north in Albany have a relationship with Hudson through the system of punishment. Hello. Now we're well protected tonight. We're glad the police are here. I couldn't resist. Okay, we'll have, I think the favorite book, the favorite topic, and certainly that has brought a lot of attention to the discussion this evening, war on drugs and the impact on the community and this community and what it's done and the impacts. The New Jim Crow, I recommend this book highly to everybody to read. Michelle Alexander has sort of set the world on fire. There's other people that have certainly talked about the war on drugs. Angela Davis, one of my all-time favorite, one of my heroines. In growing up, Angela certainly spent time struggling to make a difference and advocates the abolition of prisons totally. So this is not a new subject. There's a lot of statistics. There's simply far too many African Americans in jail, and I'll leave it at that. Alice Green can give us more of the stats. Right, Alice?
I'm trying to get away from stats.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, clearly the war on drugs has been hyped up. It's been a media event. It's been has had huge impacts on our community. So I want to move to the discussion. We will follow this event with the new movie that has just come out called In the House I Live. To my right is Cedrick Fulton, who's a neighbor of TSL, who grew up in Hudson on Columbia Street, right up the street, and has served a total of 17 years in prison and drug-related crimes and possession, etc. I'll let him tell his story. Alice Green, who is one of our distinguished guests from Albany, who's done a tremendous amount of research in Albany around the justice and fairness, and has done an extensive report about the drug sweeps, the sort of targeting the African American community in Albany, and documented and has suggested some things to the governor, which I'm sure she can tell us more about. And Derek Anderson, who is our neighbor up in Albany, who spent 30 years in prison and has a lot of information about how it all works, how it all happens, what the drug laws, what is the impact of the drug laws, what is the difference between cocaine and crack, and what is the price one pays. What is the price white people pay versus the price that black people pay? I'll be very blunt. It's clearly out of whack. So let's just get down to business. We're so glad you're all here. Let me introduce Cedrick and talk a little bit about what happened, what the impacts on your life. What happened when you came home? What happened? How'd you get there?
Again, my name is Cedrick, from Hudson all my life. Other than, the time I spent in prison. I spent 17 years in prison. I first got arrested for drugs, drug-related. My first drug-related offense was 1992 in Schenectady. Pretty much got ran out of Hudson, being a menace in Hudson. Went to Schenectady with some relatives, made a friend of mine, got arrested for drugs, along with 36 other people. Got offered 6 months, 5 years probation, didn't take that, didn't listen to the advice, didn't know what was going on, young, didn't really know what was going on, and I took a 1 to 3. The 1 to 3 that I did wasn't a deterrent at all. 6 months in Schenectady County Jail. Then I went to reception for maybe about 5 days or something like that, and I ended up going to shock. I signed out of shock. 4 of my childhood friends was along with me for the ride. Didn't like the way they was talking to me, didn't like the authority or anything like that. Thought they were hillbillies, Signed out, they told me I was gonna make my first parole board. I ended up going to Oneida Correctional Facility, and was there for maybe about 3 months, made my first parole board, and they sent me to Hudson Correctional. Went to Hudson Correctional. It was pretty much like they threw out the red carpet for me because I was from Hudson, and the guy that ran the work release, his brother was the first guy that arrested me.
So it's all in the family.
Pretty much. Came home, and when I came home, my parole officer was pretty much anything goes. And
And the parole officer was here in Hudson?
yes, it was pretty much anything goes. All of my friends were on parole. Cousins was on parole. So they pretty much gave me the rundown.
Started. Back up a little bit and
yes.
talk about your home, what your home life was
yes,
like?
absolutely. My home life. My mother was an alcoholic and an addict. I'm the oldest out of 5, and a lot of responsibility. Seeing my mother using drugs, seeing my mother drinking, things like that. My home life was pretty bad. Pretty bad. I say it time and time again. When crack hit Hudson, it was a savior for me. That thing was. It was an opportunity for me to go out. My self-esteem was shot. My self-esteem was beat to the ground. So it was a way for me to go out there and establish some false self-esteem. This is a way where I can get me some extra dollars. By that time, I was running around with some friends, and we was doing anything to buy 40 ounces of beer and a bag of weed, anything, whatever. And somebody offers to give us a package, and there was so many of us that we was like, we're not gonna pay it back. We're not paying it back. We'll take whatever. We're gonna fight you if you want your package back. And we took the package and we started selling drugs. It wasn't a lot of money. We thought it was a lot of money at the time, but it wasn't a lot of money. And got addicted to alcohol and marijuana. Knew the consequences of getting locked up, but at the time, I didn't know, the time. I didn't know how much time I was gonna get. I knew it was a chance that I was gonna get locked up, but at the time, I say, I didn't care. My thing was, as long as I don't gotta go back into that household, to that lifestyle, jail is an upgrade, Jail was an upgrade for me. Didn't get caught for a while. When I did get caught, I got a couple breaks. I got a couple breaks, which wasn't, you give your kids breaks all the time. You get no credibility no more. So I gave the authority no credibility at that time.
Because they were too.
Exactly.
They were too lenient.
Right. And that's when I ended up getting shipped off to Schenectady with some relatives and ended up getting incarcerated for the first time.
What, did you go to school during this time?
I was going to Hudson High School, and I got kicked out of Hudson High School. I was going to an alternate school. I went back to Hudson High School, got kicked out again. I went to Schenectady and got kicked out of Mount Pleasant in Schenectady. And I ended up getting arrested and got my GED while I was arrested.
So let's go to your story, so we have a little background and so we get the conversation. Derek, what happened? It's a long story, I'm sure.
Well, my story is kind of long. First of all, my name is Derek Anderson. They call me Hotel. And in this arena, participating in this symposium that you extended me the opportunity to speak to the issue on the war on drugs. Before I do that, based on I'm in this type of environment, for the most part, Hotep is a universal greeting of peace and prayer wishing you and your family well. So when a person greets you with Hoteps, he's acknowledging your life work. It's no different than Bona Dias, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, and we and etc. So before I begin, I always like to begin saying Hotep to everybody that's here. And I appreciate that everybody that's present. Now with respect to my story, I ended up serving 31 years and being incarcerated for a murder. I'm not here to retry my personal case, but nevertheless, I will tell everybody in this room, I ended up serving 31 years due to a lack of finance. That's not the issue. But when somebody says you want to talk about your history, this is what I say to give a perspective about the person who's sitting in front of you today. The person that I was yesterday is not the person who I am today. I'm better today. That's who I am. And that's pretty much the person who sits before you. But the reason why I've chose to accept the invitation to come and speak to you, to speak at this symposium, is to speak about the fallout from the war on drugs and the actual casualties. Who are the actual casualties? It depends on the perspective that you have. And the way I look at it is like this. The criminal justice system can be more criminal in its design than the average criminal mind, but do we truly understand it? And the people sitting in this room today should always have a voice. And it's important to have a voice because I learned during my period of incarceration, when it comes to community and family, that the only way that you can have a successful criminal is based on the community failures. So if you fail to have a voice about anything that's affecting your community, your family, your sons and your daughters, you just can't point your fingers at the system when you have a lack of involvement. I think we all have a responsibility to have a voice. And that's the reason why I'm here.
I think that's really the heart of the discussion that where we are today in this war, which has gone on and raged, that the community is really misunderstood, was not aware of what really was going on, that it was about punishment and not really understanding what our role in this was as a community. Alice, what do you think about what's happening in Albany and the discussions you're working on with your organization in terms of addressing how do we recover from such a large organized effort to create more prisons, to employ more people? I know when the Hudson prison is at risk, everybody shouts, oh, we're going to lose these jobs. The prisons are so ingrained in our system of our economics and how we run the country. And it is the new Jim Crow. It is a way of controlling and in taking rights away. And since we just had an election, voting is one of them. So you're the expert, please.
Well, I'm not an expert. These guys are experts. They've been in the system. They know it better than I do. And I do talk about this issue based on Michelle Alexander's book, so I'm glad you mentioned her book. As also you mentioned, there's really nothing that new in the book, because there are issues that we've been dealing with for many, many years about incarceration, war on drugs, and all of that. But she has done something that I think many of us couldn't do, and that was make it, she's articulated the issues in such a way that people have become interested in this particular problem. It's been, and two things I talk about from her book. really is that, first of all, it's hard to understand what these men went through and what our community is going through because we fail to put it in some kind of historical perspective. I think it's very important to understand this war on drugs and mass incarceration from a historical perspective because people don't buy it. They don't understand it. They simply want to say, well, the reason you have so many people in prison who are black is because blacks commit all the crime. So, which is, there's nothing further from the truth than that. Because historically we've hidden the criminal behavior of whites and we've excused it and we've treated blacks in an entirely different way. So what I usually talk about in terms of putting in a perspective is that, and Michelle does this in her book, is that we have to look at this as another form of oppression that has not stopped. It's just simply taken a different form. And I try to get people to look back as far away as the period of enslavement, which is, as you know, began this whole process of oppression and that we've lived through for all these years. So I try to get them to understand that that was a major form of oppression and that after that, following that, we also, and I'm shortcutting this, but we can talk about it later, of course, is to look at what happened during the original Jim Crow and segregation, which was another form of oppression. And the role that the criminal justice system has played both in the enslavement period and as well as during segregation. And then the war on drugs was simply just another way of oppressing black people. I mean, it was put into effect, as you know, Nixon was the first one to coin this war on drugs thing. But it basically was retaliation for what had happened during the civil rights movement. And so it was designed to control and oppress black people. So you have to understand that. And because Michelle Alexander, one of the things is that she has difficulty doing, and it's very difficult to do, and that is to talk about this issue as a civil rights issue, as a social justice or a human rights issue, because people, again, don't buy it. They simply want to see it as crime. And we try to get people to understand that there is a difference, the difference between incarceration and mass incarceration. And incarceration simply refers to a punishment that our society has decided to give to people for breaking its laws. But mass incarceration is very different. It has nothing to do with law enforcement. And that's the most difficult thing for people to understand. And once they understand that, it's easier to understand what's happening to young black men on the street. It has, as I said, it has nothing to do with law enforcement. It's simply another policy that's put in place and has political and social goals rather than law enforcement. And the idea is you use the war on drugs as a tool to bring about the continued oppression of particularly black males. You incarcerate them. And so these gentlemen are talking about what the impact of all of that is on our communities is significant. And Michelle Alexander, when she talks about a caste system, she's talking about the effects that this whole policy of mass incarceration has on communities of color in specifically. That you eventually have large numbers of people in a community. If you look at Albany, for instance, each year the percentage of the black population that has a felony conviction keeps going up. And it goes up and up. And so we're developing this system where people can't get out of it. They can't become a part of mainstream society because, and as you guys know very well, it becomes very difficult to get employment. You can't vote. There's a whole bunch of, the collateral damage is extensive. So you're locked in to a part of the community where, unfortunately, not too many people know you're there. Because the other characteristic of this whole thing is that this population becomes invisible. You know, I see them every morning because I'm in the community. I see the lines of people going, trying to get services, food, whatever it happens to be from all these programs that are there. And I see them because they come to my office. They've just gotten out of prison. That's how we met, right?
Yes,
they might come to my office because they've just gotten out of prison. But there's this whole population which is growing is invisible to mainly white America. So they don't see it. So it's very difficult to try to get them to think about it as I said, a social justice or human rights issue. They only see it as a law enforcement issue, which is what it's not. But it's also a health issue as well. So
Yeah,
that's what I was looking at and trying to find out how can we get the rest of the community to understand what's going on, and that's why I started getting involved in these reports, which we can talk about later if you want.
Well, I think this opportunity to reach out to the community and bring people into the space and hear the stories starts to unravel the sort of, you're not there. Well, the reality is there's a lot of people in the community who are, have a difficult time finding a place to live or getting services, or don't want to talk about where they've been because it's a stigma. You're not going to get a job, you're going to struggle, you have to jump through a lot of hoops, you have to, parole officers are in your lives. A lot of the things we don't understand because we see you gentlemen as somehow we can't have a relationship with you because you are other. And what that other is clearly undefined because you're basically a criminal. And even though you've paid a price, the price never seems to end. You're constantly paying. And when does the pay stop? And you're not going to school, you're not getting a job, there are all these limits. Don't stop. And the frustration.
what happened is, like, we're having the topic about being a criminal.
Pardon me?
What happened, we're having this discussion, and you label about the fact that because we've been convicted and we are viewed as criminal, that becomes a problem, the label. The stigmatization
Right.
that carries on. And that's also an expansion of the problem on the war on drugs, where people misunderstand what actually takes place. So let's talk about a person being a criminal and society's responsibility to understand what's taking place. When a person gets convicted of a crime and he becomes incarcerated, his period of incarceration is the time that they deem that is equivalent to the act that he committed, in which he's supposed to receive treatment. Now, opposed to this individual receiving treatment because of his inability to self-correct and live life on life terms and actually follow the norms of society, he is labeled as a criminal, not viewed as a patient, despite the fact that he has been criminally, he's been deemed to be criminally insane and incarcerated. Because that's the label that you get. Now, if opposed to placing the label on individuals who become incarcerated as a criminal, and they're treated as a patient and receive the same type of care that a person would receive if he happened to become institutionalized and happened to go to a mental institution, you have a different response from his community. So part of the damage of being incarcerated is labeling people, dehumanizing people with labels.
Plus, a lot of people.
The goal is not to treat. So it's simply to punish. And to, yes, the label is there. As I said before, as the population becomes increasingly composed of people with conviction records, and we've been doing this for a long time. That's why I said we have to always talk about history.
Well, Nixon was 76, 74, so it's been, Reagan stepped it up, he put a lot of money in it, Mr. Clinton put a lot of money in it, we've been investing heavily in this.
But we have historically been trying to identify and define black people as inferior and criminal.
Right,
that's part of the whole racist nature of our society. And so that stereotype affects everything. It affects police officers, it affects everybody in the court, prosecutors, all of them. We come to think of black people, particularly black males, as inferior criminal beings. not human. And so it becomes very easy to do whatever you want to with them once you sort of paint them as being something less than human. So, I'd like to believe, and some people do believe, that prisons are benign institutions, that you simply commit a crime, you go there, and something magical is happening, somebody's treating you, or somebody's rehabilitating you, or something, and then you're supposed to come out and be a constructive member of society. But prisons are not benign. They're toxic institutions. And so it becomes so difficult to come back into a society that's going to view you forever as an inferior person and as a criminal. And all decisions that are made in those institutions are going to be based on those stereotypes.
On your less than, and less
That's
and less.
perpetuated in there. That's definitely perpetuated in there. It's the same thing as if you take a child that's 5 years old and you keep telling the child over and over and over that she's less than, she's gonna, after a while, she's gonna start believing that she's less than. It's the same thing when you take a kid that's 18 years old and you send him to Green Correctional Facility or something like that, and you keep telling him that he's less than, that he's, an inmate. You're gonna always be an inmate. You're an F up, all of these things, you keep telling them that over and over and over, especially, that word inmate. You keep ingraining that into somebody's mind over and over and over and over. It's like you filling up that tape again. You filling up that tape, you just wiping out everything else that he may believe and make him believe that he's less than, that he's that inmate. Once you start making him believe that, he's gonna start acting like that. He's gonna start walking around that prison yard or whatever, he's gonna start acting like that. He's gonna start becoming something that he's really not, and it's based on, like you were just saying, the lack of education. It's a joke. People think that, they got these programs inside these prisons and things like that. Most thing I did when I was in there was work for 26 cents an hour, 8 hours a day.
What did you do?
A lot of times it depends on where I'm at. I had a high school education. And a college degree. So what I did is I was teaching, like phase 1, phase 2. I was introducing new individuals into the prison system, letting them know the rules of the prison. I was sometimes teaching as a teacher's aide. The teachers, listen to what I said. I was teaching, but I'm a teacher's aide. Getting 26 cents an hour while the teacher is sitting there reading a sport magazine, chewing gum, and sometimes most of the time in the hallway talking to one of his peers. He's not in the classroom teaching, getting 26 cents an hour doing that, and they got these vocations, I was in a jail where it was 1,700 people, and some of these guys need this vocation or this drug program to go to a parole board, they may have 2 programs in there for 1,700 individuals. Who's going to the parole board? They're not letting you out. It's a joke in there. If you really believe that we're going inside those prison walls and we're going in there to learn something, we're learning how to be better criminals. That's what most of us is in there, learning how to be better criminals. Getting angry at society, hating the world. And once you get that mentality, that hate the world mentality, like you said, it's toxic. It's toxic in there.
Well, I agree with a lot what my peer said regarding the type of environment that exists in prison. But I would be misrepresenting the truth to say that in the most radical place of healing that we have for our society, that some of us have to go because of how we were living, that there's no opportunities, no hope. Because wherever you go, you're going to meet people who take advantage of opportunities, and there's always going to be in dark places people that provide you with hope or a light at the end of the tunnel where you're able to help yourself. However, there aren't enough quality programs geared towards helping individuals become better people. There's not enough bridges built in which it allows the community to play a larger role in helping individuals redirect their lives and develop a sense of life direction and life purpose. There's not enough of that. But at the same time, I know, because I've been in those dark places, There are some individuals that don't want to pay that price to be free. There are going to be some individuals that are going to return to society regardless of the opportunities provided, regardless of the education that they receive. They go home and victimize their own community, victimize their own family. So I try to speak to both sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. See, because a lot of people, they want to return to civilization, but they don't want to become civilized. A lot of people want to talk about being righteous, but they're not about righteousness, you know. And so I can't say.
But you have to ask yourself why. Why is that? You know, because with the mass incarceration, for instance, we make it very easy for people to be put in situations where they have very few choices and have no alternatives, and so they take whatever they can. People who blacks are no different than anybody else. I mean, I think we all want the same thing. We all want to have a job, a place to live, and all of that. There's nothing any different about black people and black males than anybody else. But yet the society tells us that there's something different about them. We take whites from the system. We don't allow them to get involved in our criminal justice system in the same kind of way. And one of the things that I've been looking at, of course, and trying to deal with people is to get them to explain to me what's happening when I talk about, some of these statistics that whites are as involved in illegal drug activity as blacks. And a lot of the reports say that they're involved at a higher rate, especially young whites, and compared to black juveniles. But if that's the case, why during the Rockefeller drug law era were 94% of the people who were incarcerated for drug offenses, why were they black and Latino if you're involved in the same rate? So you've got to explain that to me in ways that I can understand, because there's something else going on. You can't point to criminality. And that's true with other crimes as well, but we focus on the drug crime. Something is wrong when you're committing most of the crime, but I'm the one who's paying the price for it. So we hide that. We hide the involvement of white criminal behavior, and it looks like black people are committing all the crimes, and they get locked out of all those opportunities that you're talking about. Mass incarceration creates these communities as well, where people have to deal with what they call, crime-generative kinds of factors that produce criminal behavior and victimization. So I don't usually talk about the individual and when I talk about this issue, because it lets everybody else off the hook. Mm-hmm. It's, something's wrong with that guy, or something's wrong with that family, when we need to look at this in a very systemic kind of way.
Well, there's 1 million people in jail, at least some of the stats that I've collected,
yes,
who are African American men. And that is a vast amount that's a big number. It's almost unimaginable. Mm-hmm. Many of the prisons are not located in the communities in which people you can't be visited. There's, I think, 4 near the Canadian border. Mm-hmm. You've been in any of those?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been in all.
So, how do you even have a relationship? How does Hudson get to Canada to visit you? How do you have opportunities to even connect or maintain a family relationship or have some connection to the place? And then if you're lucky enough to come home, how do you arrive? What happens when you come home?
You're gonna always get back to point A. And that is your communities and your family has to have a voice in what has been, so it won't be no more. So no matter how much we discuss the problem, we can stay stuck in the problem. But it's about talking about the solution.
Well, I know Angela Davis mentioned a few solutions. One was to take the schools, the footprint of the school, and make it more useful and more friendly in people wanting to go to that school and stay there and get education, which I know many of our community struggles to, I don't know, a large percentage of our children don't graduate in Hudson, so there limits their opportunities to succeed and have access.
School is racist.
Well,
That may be, one thing you're saying may be a little, many skilled things about them. They're fucking racist is what they are, okay? If you want to deal with schools, begin to deal with that issue of them by confronting them in some small way or the other. Until we do that, nothing will change. Second thing I wanted to say was this.
It is the pipeline really too, the prison pipeline starts really in the school, at least in this community that I've seen.
Let's start in the community.
Huh?
Can I say something, ma'am?
In the school. Let's start in the community.
Well, the community has to speak out about why PINS petitions are handed out so easily, for example.
Well, that's right.
And,
For
or
one.
why children, why are the African-American children not graduating? Why is that happening? Why, I mean, these numbers, go ahead up there, speak out.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I come from a low-income neighborhood, and I have left high school early to start college. But I think that it's something larger than just the community. I think that people of color are strategically placed in environments in which they can, like, massively oppress them, because I went to a friendly school. I went to a school where people were nice to me, but I also went to a school that had a lack of resources and a lack of education, where, you're right, it is a school to prison pipeline. We were targeted. There was an overly aggressive police presence in my neighborhood, but yet the people were nice to me in school, but the school system is not set up for students of color to succeed. It's set up to pass us along the brinks. There's a lot of grade inflation in low-income neighborhoods in which you get these, you're like, oh, you're a little bit smart, but really they're just passing you along just to see you get out. And most of the times I feel like the reasons why people commit these crimes is not even just because like their neighborhoods are bad, but because like within those neighborhoods there's also a larger lack of resources, inadequate health facilities, and it's just a lack of education and a lack of support. So like you, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but like you said, it's the only way out. It's the only option that you have. And even with like all the ambition in the world and like all the like courage you have, it's so hard as a person of color to succeed because there's so many things, so many forces to oppress you, so many things to hold you back that sometimes you just feel like giving up and you commit crimes sometimes.
All right, good for you.
Well, this is different.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, what Alice was saying before. You know, I've known, I'm a mainstream person. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I went to Catholic school. I've been a guest of the Tombs. I worked in the Tombs as a mental health person. So I know the systems. I know lots of mainstream people, white people with children. I can tell you about 10 families I know that have mortgaged their homes to get their children who got involved in drugs from going to prison. They have lost $50,000 to $100,000 to pay lawyers and whoever else they had to pay off to get their kids from being sentenced to prison. Many of them. That's one thing they're able to do if they got the money to do it, okay? Secondly, I wanted to ask a question. Some years ago, someone said to me, Alan, Google prison industrial complex. So I went on the computer and I Googled this bad boy and I saw these blocks of buildings all over the country just being built to put people in. What people? Okay? So I don't know where they're at now with that, whether that's been slowed down or not. But people don't know about that they're building privatized prisons to put us in when the hammer goes down. And we don't say nothing, we don't do nothing. We the monkey that don't see, don't hear, don't nothing what's going on.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what the war on drugs has really done, because until the war on drugs, starting in the 70s and of course shot up in the 80s, we didn't have that many prisons before that. And so that's another way to look at this. because something happened during that period. All of a sudden, I mean, blacks didn't all of a sudden start committing all these crimes that made the population jump, 2,000%. But there was a calculated strategy here to use the war on drugs, mass incarceration, to incarcerate people, and in order to do that, you had to build prisons, and so that's where the prison industrial complex issue came up. That now it's become an industry that is dependent upon. So many people are dependent upon it, and we're spending billions and billions of dollars to keep this prison system going. So therefore, nobody wants to do the things that you're talking about to change it, because so many people are dependent upon it. Not only people who work in the prisons, but you're talking about lawyers, you're talking about people who work throughout the criminal justice system. I think they would all have a heart attack if they found out tomorrow that people were not going to be incarcerated, because we depend on it, and so that's part of the problem. And yes, those prisons are there. A lot of people know they're there. But unfortunately, it's the thing that's driving this whole movement.
Well, that money that's being spent to build these prisons is being spent on educating our children.
Yes, it could be.
And we're allowing that to happen. We're allowing that to happen by our selective ignorance. We choose to be deaf, dumb, and blind about what goes on around us because we all feel powerless and helpless and hopeless to do anything about it. Well, you can do something about it if you come together and develop coalitions. That's what is in this room, what I can see is a coalition of people. There hasn't been any such thing in this community in the past. We've had tribes of people who do their thing over here, and the other tribe competes with them and do their thing over there. We got giant-ass politicians that don't do anything but advocate for their damn self. And we are divided and conquered. Okay?
And I think what you just said speaks to, I want to go back to New Jim Crow. How many of you have read the book? Anybody read it? Okay, great. I'm glad to see some people who read it. And I think all of you should read it so you understand. It makes it clear about what's really happening. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've been doing is trying to point out to my community what this disparity looks like. So that's why I've done the reports. I've done 3 reports looking at the disparity in terms of treatment of African Americans in during arrest, prosecution, and of course incarceration. And the first one I did was the adults. I looked at the disparity in treatment of adults and looking at the war on drugs and the incredibly great disparity that exists in Albany County, Schenectady County, and Rensselaer County in terms of the involvement of blacks in the system. And then I did the same thing with juveniles. We looked at the treatment of juveniles throughout the system. And again, you see the same pattern, that people are incarcerated at a rate, like 3 times what their representation is in the population. The most recent one I did, and I just wanted to mention this, is I finally called this "What Have We Done?", which is trying to get people to look at, what have we actually done during this whole mass incarceration movement? What have we done to people of color? What have we done to their families and their communities? And I also focus in this on the, there were 4 drug sweeps that were done in Albany starting in 2006. And what I focus on is looking at there's 50 young men, and some of them were as young as 17, who were rounded up and incarcerated for a total of 617 years. These are 50 of them. 617 years of the 3 sweeps. The 4th one is not included because they have not been sentenced yet. But they were incarcerated for a non-violent offense under the federal and state regulations. Okay, they use corrupt legislation, corruption legislation, to really put these kids away for a third of their lives, you know. And so we focus on just 50 of those kids. I mean, 617 years, you know, and they were targeted. You know, somebody decided they had to round up all these people in Albany and put them through this to get them off the street. And they were not violent offenses. They told the community that we had to do this because these people were, you know, doing all these horrible, violent crimes that were threatening public safety.
So let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Let me interrupt. What do you believe that allowed them to do that? While you was doing this study, what do you believe that allowed this to occur?
Well, it's what I've been talking about in terms of how we feel about African American males, that they have to be controlled. And one of the best ways to control them according to the system is that you put them away for long periods of time, and then you neutralize them to the point that they're not able to threaten what they maintain, threaten public safety.
The reason why I asked you that question, there's something real powerful that we all have in here. Something real powerful we all have. We all been gifted with, for the most part, if we're fortunate. If we know that everything is occurring as you're sharing with us, then there's one thing that we all need to say. And that is, when is enough enough? And learning how to say, stop. Learning how to stand up, because we can redefine the problem over and over again. We can take the statistic that we already know and we can even color them in. But when you get back to the bottom line is, are you going to not only have a voice when you need to have a voice, because all you need to say is, yo, stop! But voice is powerful.
Right.
And a united voice with some action behind it can make a difference.
But see, we still have defined it as a criminal justice issue, which I don't believe it is.
It's a community issue.
You know.
But you know what? It's also a family issue. Yes. Because it can also begin right at home. You have many young men, like when he talked about him being incarcerated, being raised by single parent families. That's a very large thing in the African American community. Single parent families. And it's something when you mostly find the single black mother raising, not just girls, but raising a son, on their own, having to, not having the father in the life, we realize a lot that goes on in the world and its reality itself. You got just many men, they're just a sperm donor, and they're not in their sons and they're not in their daughters' lives. The incarceration just doesn't begin with just the African American men. It begins also with African American women too, and their ways for their survival to try to struggle in order to take care of their families. But yet still, if we want to take it in another way, when he says we have a voice, we also have to be positive on this matter too. Can't always just look at it as a negative way too, because there is success too that can be turned around in this, when he says when a person that has been incarcerated, if they do come out, there, many, like you said, the statistic doesn't know about programs that is provided for people that have been incarcerated. For example, I will say what I work for. I work for the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley. I'm the community outreach specialist. And for those who have been incarcerated, who have come out and who have a disability, they don't know about supportive services that are there for them. And we are located at 802 Columbia Street. So these are supportive services that are provided where they can connect to make sure that they get the services that they need, especially one which is called Social Security Disability, or even if they want to go back to school, Access VR, which is vocational rehabilitation, continuing education. So these are supportive services that can work with you to help you to make sure, even if the system like Social Security Administration, if you want to go to work, there's benefit advisement to also help so you can keep your benefits and things like that. But then on another turn, we say in positive, this is what I want to express about some positive services, but also too, as the voice we need, in order for us to connect together, we also got to connect together within the family, because a lot of times children, when they grow up, they live what they learn. And when that process of living what you learn can be halted, and another direction, like Alan said, is not only going to begin at home, it's going to begin in the community, and it's going to be in the schools, because it's a job for all of us to do, not just one can do it on its own. And there is success in raising families when even if back then, if the services are there and you have to seek yourself out, I'm just saying, and I'm not being negative, anybody, you have to sometimes seek out those services. You have to seek out what support is there. You have to stay on things in order to find out, and in order to find success in being able to rear children. And also too, it's also about choice. We all are given the freedom of choice on which direction we want to go. Just because all the time we see a lot of negative don't mean we have to be the ones to be in that negative. Sometimes, but also too, sometimes ones have to make that negative part their family, because they don't want to go back to what they already see. Sometimes this person, with what they get involved in, is their family, is their support system, is their love, is their bloodline, because what they really have that truly is their bloodline is not that, because it's not existing where they actually really need it. So that's another thing too, in order to be successful, that they can.
Somebody dropped that ball, somebody dropped that ball with that information you was talking about. You got so many individuals like myself that come back to Columbia County to nothing. You talk about 802 Columbia Street. This is the first time I'm hearing about 802 Columbia Street. And they say they have resources in these prisons that I was in, and they give me information. They giving me packets to teach individuals that's going home and things like that. And I never came across none of this information. I'm talking about it's a bunch of books with nothing on it. Outdated information and things like that. I came home August 17th of this year. I got paroled to the DSS. Didn't have a place to go. I got paroled to DSS, and it took me up until about 2 weeks ago to get some funds. I have two of my kids in my household, 4 and 3, that I have sole custody of. And if it wasn't for a friend of mine helping me out, I don't know what I'd be feeding them.
I think that's the key. The friends. Who is the support beyond? I mean, social services and all these are really nice ideas,
right?
But in reality, it isn't going to be the answer.
No, what he's saying,
when you coming home from doing, from outside your community for 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, and 10 years, sometimes you lose touch with these friends, and your only resource is the system, the same system that's willing to put you back. To put their thumb back on you. All I'm hearing is, you better do this, you better do this, you better do this, you better do this. You know what I mean? And my morale will get knocked down if I didn't have a sense, of pride or something like that, and saying that this is enough. Or if I don't have friends in my ears coming along and things like that. If I don't have the drive to go and learn something else, to find this information. A lot of people don't got the sense that I got. A lot of people are not fortunate. And then you talk about the choices. I had some choices, but my choices is based. It's like the guy that that's in the bush in Vietnam when he got a gun. He got some choices away. But my back is against the wall now. My choices is coming. I'm in a unnatural environment now, and I got to make some unnatural choices. Some unnatural things gonna come because of these choices. For 25 years, I've been in a lifestyle. I don't want to go out there in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, in the rain, and sling no drugs, because it's fun. I don't want to do it because it's fun. I'm doing it, because I'm addicted to this thing now. A lot of people, they toss that out. They forget that a lifestyle is an addiction also. When am I going to get treated for this addiction that I have? You send me to Twin County, I can go in Twin County and talk about my addiction to cocaine or heroin. I don't have an addiction to cocaine or heroin. I can go in there and say that I'm an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic. When are we going to talk about my issue? Because if we don't address my issue, Cedrick is going to find himself back in the street again, and my 3 and 4-year-old is going to get raised by somebody else, and pretty soon somebody's going to be visiting him in prison, or something like that. When they going to do something, for my addiction? Things like that.
I think that you're absolutely right. It's not, I certainly support community services if they're there and they can help some people. But a lot of times they're not there, and the ones that are there are not adequate. And not only that, but you're talking about a system that's in place to keep people like these young men out of mainstream society.
Yeah, they want to do that, but
Yeah, but you know, it's nice to say, it's easy to say, you know, you have choices or you have supports here, but it doesn't work that way. When you come out of that facility and you've been there for 20, 25 years, and the society says that you can't vote, you can't have a job because you have a conviction record, you can't live certain places, you know, your back is against the wall. Where do you go?
yeah, their back is against the wall, but the fact is that when he said you have to go to DSS, some of these programs are not going to tell you about us. That's what I'm trying to say, and I'm just saying as a informational referral to let them know that if you've been incarcerated and you do come out, let them know that it is here, so that it can be passed on to other ones. That's what I'm.
Thank you all for coming. I want to be very specific about this county. We're in this county, and there's pretty much nothing here. We have no services. We have no reentry. We have no Center of Law and Justice, no legal aid society, you know, basically no social justice centers or anything. So we're falling by the wayside. I came home and I went to Albany, and I went to try to get help, but they couldn't help me because everything I got, I taught in phase 3. I ran transitional services in the prison I was. The whole thing, payroll, curriculum, hiring, everything. I ran the whole thing, had a little office and coffee and all that in there while the lady was making $65,000 sitting around. So we have nothing here. We have no mass transportation. We have no jobs. We have no type of empowerment tools. So for the vast majority of people who come out, they're just waiting to go back. You know, that's the realization of the situation. You have to, it's reality. If you have a drug crime, you can't go to public housing. So where the hell are you going in this community? Because they barely got housing anyway. You know, you come home, where are you going to find a job? You don't have mass transportation, so you're going to pay a cab. You can't even pay to live anywhere. How can you pay to go to work? We have nothing here, so I want to be very specific. There are some services. Even to get to go to Bessett, you have to get a cab to get over to Columbia Green Community College.
Well, we can stop that one right there. You do not have to get a cab to go over, because if you want to be part of Access VR, that's also another position I have. I'm the van driver. So contact 802 Columbia. So this is what I'm saying. There is some there. That's the only reason why, as a black woman here, I'm just letting you know that there is for those who do come out.
But
that's all I'm saying.
I'm supposed to, I called Albany, I'm supposed to go to their next training. They didn't say there was a bus available. So you might say that now, but they didn't say it was available when I just called. Now, and I have they didn't say that. When I called Albany to sign up, you know, maybe there's a lack of communication, but when I called them to sign up, they should have said, well, you can call the Independent Living Center for some help.
Well, this is what I want to say, bro. I'm gonna share my personal story with everybody here. I just got home for 31 years. I don't have no type of temporary assistance from DSS or none of these organizations that have been newly created to deliver services to ex-offenders returning home who need the type of financial assistance me and my brother need. I went to DSS and I filled out all the applications that's required a person who needs assistance. In the interim, I was told after filling out all these applications that I'm not going to receive any temporary assistance as a result of another public entity, Whitney M. Young, being unable to schedule me for a physical. So now, I've been in prison 31 years. My mother lives about 2 hours away from me, or an hour away from me. So my mother has seen me more when I was in prison than since I've been home. So that's the type of assistance that we're not getting. And that's not speaking to what you're saying, because we do got choices, and I agree with you about that. See, my hero today is the homeless man sitting in the street. He's not going to harm you or anybody else to improve the quality of his life. And when I returned to society, I made the decision in my mind, despite the state of destitute I might have to live in before I can do better, is not to return to a life of crime at no cost, because there are services out there for it. It may be, we may have to struggle a little harder to get them, but it's still a form of oppression. But when everything is said and done, it still go back to point A. We got to have more than a voice. See, we dealing with a lot of different ideas, and I'm tired of dealing with people of ideas. I like to deal with people of action, and a positive action. And the last thing I would like to close on is this. I'm not trying to see the problem that we're dealing with as a community through what you call tainted lenses based on race. See, we like to consider ourselves beings, the most intelligent species on the planet. I don't know how many people here may watch the National Geographic program that they have, and sometimes they might highlight the elephant, right? Anybody ever watch when they show the elephants? When you see that herd of elephants being highlighted, and you see a calf getting ready to be faced with a crisis situation, what happens to the elephants? They pull together, they surround that calf, they respond to a crisis. But despite the fact that they're not considered or deemed to be one of the most intelligent species on the planet, they return to that crisis as a community. Not that he's black, not that he's white. And not to dismiss the fact that mass incarceration is a problem for African Americans, because that it is. But we can't deal with a problem because it's not bringing forth a solution. When we come to have these symposiums, we're supposed to be looking for a solution to the problem that we're dealing with, because we only one community, you know? And that's the only thing I would like to share with you. Let's respond to the problem as a community, that's all.
But, yeah.
Alan.
What he was saying, the problem this community has been that has not been able to come together to realistically identify what the systemic problems are. And we have a health, education, and welfare system here. We have a criminal justice system and an education system. They conjointly practice oppression against the minorities and the poor of this county. You can't get too many people in this room or this community to sit down and say, we agree. That is the problem. Now, can we agree on what may be the first thing we can do to intervene? Okay, then they're all punk out. That's the problem in this community.
You're right. Also, with this issue, as I said, it's one of the three major oppressive forces that we've had to deal with historically: enslavement, Jim Crow, and now mass incarceration. We put them in the same category. Okay, and in order to end the Civil War, what do we have to do? I mean, in enslavement, they did it through a war. And in order to end the Jim Crow segregation, it took a civil rights movement, which was enormous. And what Michelle Alexander says is that in order to deal with this current problem that we have of oppression, mass incarceration, it's going to take a grassroots movement, because nobody's going to, first of all, they don't want, as I said before, they don't want to identify this problem as a civil rights or human rights issue. They want to look at it simply as a criminal behavior issue, which is not what it is. Mass incarceration is not a law enforcement criminal justice issue, okay? And so until we accept that and understand it, we are not going to get out there and say we've got to change the system, that everybody's got to be involved and create this grassroots movement that's going to make that kind of change. But that's what it's going to take, and I think she's absolutely correct. So how do you get that moving is the issue.
Well, speaking, go ahead.
In terms of what you are talking about, for myself, I don't see it as a black or white issue. We got people going to jail from every race. And every one of those races are going through the torture that these prison systems are putting these people through. And in order for things to change, it's not about us just coming to a solution. If we're not going to hit the government who is allowing all these prisons to be brought about, as opposed to putting more programs, more community centers for these children and families to have to better ourselves, we're not going to go anywhere. We can keep talking all day long, but at what point are we going to make the legislators responsible for the fact that they're in office, because the ones that can vote, put them in office. When are we gonna go to these different legislators and senators and say, look, instead of allowing another liquor store to be in our community, how about putting a community center? When are more community centers gonna be in our communities? And it's gonna start within our communities. It's not just about everybody going to jail and we're just focusing on jail. Yeah, the ones that are going to jail because they don't have anything in our communities. And at what point are we going to focus on, okay, when are you going to put a community center or a program for abused or single family parents, whether it be men or women, in the community? And that's where it's going to start. They've taken all of the different programs to help the community, and rather than have those programs, you'd rather build more prisons.
Right. I think you're right, and I think that's what she's talking about when she says a grassroots kind of movement, that it's not just getting rid of mass incarceration, that's part of it, because it's affected our community so heavily, but it's people saying no, that we want money spent on education, recreation, housing, whatever it happens to be, instead of putting people in prison under this policy of mass incarceration. Certainly, there are other people in prison, we're not meaning to suggest that, but it disproportionately affects people of color. It is an issue of race because black males in particular are targeted, including black women are probably the fastest growing population, but black males are targeted in every community that I've ever been in. When there are few black males in the community, the incarceration rates for them are much higher than for anybody else. So it's affecting, and it affects children too, because they see that their fathers are in prison. You know, they put young juveniles in secure facilities, and disproportionately they are people of color. And in the one that we looked at in Albany, 100% of the people who were in secure facilities were black. Juveniles, they were black. Okay, so there is a race issue. There's a problem of institutional racism in this country that targets us, and we have to understand that. Okay, but it's going to affect other people.
Claudia wants to say something over here.
You say what we have is our voices. And in this room, not that long ago, the government here wanted to take DSS and put it 6 miles out of Hudson. And there were people in this room who gathered together, and because we raised our voices in unison and stood and demanded of our, legislative body that this not happen, it happened. What I would like to see come out of here, because mass incarceration is huge, and here we are sitting in Hudson. If there are people who in the room who want to focus on the 1 or 2 things that we can do here with our voices, then that voice is added to that voice, and then that voice, and certainly we have voices like Alice's and Cedrick's and Derek, and who are, and Quentin, and people who are speaking up to guide us to those points. So I think what we have is our voices. I think we do have moments that are galvanizing, such as the DSS, attempt to move social services out of Hudson, where the majority of people were being served. Things like these that sometimes the huge picture is so big you don't know where to start. So what I would like
to see is that we don't, generally people don't see this as a problem. As I said, they're very well hidden. It's almost an invisible population. One of the things that we recommended in the last report was that the governor select a sort of a truth and reconciliation kind of committee, which would allow people's stories to be heard, would allow communities and families to talk about the impact of mass incarceration policy on their lives, and what has happened here. As I said, I call this, what have we done? We've done something horrible. It's a horrible problem. And we're not accepting it as I said, the kind of issue that it is, but we simply want to point to the individual and blame the individual for a criminal behavior. And that's where we get stuck.
For those that say that it's not a black and white issue, you know, they need to spend 3 days outside a downstate correctional facility and see these buses that's pulling in. You know, these buses that's pulling in, you got 42 inmates on this bus, 42 people on this bus, and out of that 42, 30 of them is black and Latino. You know, maybe 35. I've been on these buses. You know, at the same time, that the buses that's you know, just and especially downstate, you know, and that's the community, you know, that's the place where this community goes to, you know, for reception. It's black and Latino. We walking in the halls and things like that. I'm only seeing people that look like me. You know, there's a few dotted here and there, but I just left a prison that has 1,740 convicts there. You know, the 1,100 of them were under the age of 22, 6 miles from Canada. You know, a lot of them there for nonviolent crimes. You know, drug offenses. You know, and they go into the parole board over and over and over and over, and they say that you're not fit for society. But these same people, they send them to the community to work in Malone, in Franklin County. Yeah. So I can work. You know, you're telling somebody that look like me that's there for a nonviolent crime. You know, you can go in my community and you can work on this farm, or you can work over here on this firehouse and things like that in this community. But when it's time for me to go to this parole board, I'm not fit for society. You know, but and again, these are people that look like me. You know, not to say that there's not other races in these prisons, but I've been inside these prisons, and a lot of them, majority of them look like me. You know. Okay,
we're 10 to 8, and the movie that follows this discussion is on this very topic. Mr. Cedrick, I believe is how you say his name, was raised by a nanny who happened to be black, who, as time went on, he found her history, certainly the story that you're hearing over and over and over again, and when he documents her life in the movie, which is very powerful, and I hope you stay and watch it. It'll be on here this week and next week. It's an opportunity to see what is being seen around the nation. Also, I know Shane Bauer, who spent some time in prison in Iran, in solitary confinement, has just visited the solitary confinements in America called Shoes, and found that they were even more harsh than what he experienced in Iran. So there's things, I think that the topic is bubbling up. There was a war called World War II, and when many of the black soldiers came home, they found that they were fighting for freedom for all of Europe, but they had no opportunities here, and I think it did push Jim Crow way up to the top of the charts. And maybe it is about a new sort of aggression on our part to address these topics, and I think action is required. I'm not sure, Quentin and I have many conversations, Alan, many of the young men in the community. You all, hopefully we can continue this conversation and return. Before we go there, we will have another event. It's not on this, it's indirectly kind of related. It is, do you have questions about food stamps, cash assistance, Medicaid, fair hearings and sanctions? We're gonna have the Empire Justice Center here, National Center for Law and Justice and Economic Justice will be here at TSL on November 27th. So be sure to take this 6 o'clock. You can ask questions, get information, inform yourself and your neighbors. Mary.
Well, the most important thing I think is, and I don't think it's the families. I do not think it's the families. I've been involved in these situations for over 40 years, and I've witnessed this in schools with our own kids. It's not the families. It's not the minority families. It's the school systems and it's the community. the school systems are down on those kids. They get, referrals, suspensions, and expulsions. And it starts when they're about 11 years old, and they get on a kid, and then it goes through their lifetime, and then obviously a lot of them leave school. Or if they're expelled from school, and they have nowhere to go. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. And then they get out in the streets, they have no money, and then that's how they get into drugs. But also, I do blame the white community. I'm sorry, I'm not young. I blame the white community for this all these years. Saturday night, we heard Joan Walsh. She's an MSNBC editor. She's just written a book, What's the Matter with White People? And she spoke at the Sanctuary for Independent Media in Troy. And it was a brilliant, brilliant thing. And luckily, there were a lot of white people in the room standing there saying, we have tried. And a lot of us have tried. And what Claudia said about, we fought the DSS move, Jan and I were there every Wednesday, and at the Board of Supervisors, we fought and we screamed, we made up a song, we yelled. There aren't enough people who come out and fight. We should be picketing the school system because they are too harsh to the kids and they make them lose hope. So that's how it all begins.
Okay, quick, back there.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you that come and have this symposium. But as Derek did say, the symposium is supposed to come to some type of result that we can put into an action. We're here to talk about these issues and come to some type of agreement on what we have to do. But we're not going to do anything until we put these words into play. And so my question is, putting these different steps that we've all given in this symposium between, taking little steps and looking at this population that is seen as invisible, so it's not seen at all. My question is, inevitable to what the big picture is, do you think the first step is trying to make this invisible population seen to the rest of the community and the society? Or what do you think the first step is going to be?
I think it's really important to talk about human beings when we're talking about this issue. Even though we talk a lot about statistics and about the policies, we need to know how it affects individual human beings and that people are seen as human beings. This, you just described institutional racism, which permeates all of our institutions in this country, is because this country does not think of me as being equal to you. And therefore, they're not going to treat me as equals. And now Michelle talks about color blindness, which is another really important issue, because people will tell you that it's not us, because there's nothing that says you can't do this because of your race or your color. But the impact is still there. And until you understand that, people are not going to get excited about doing things. And until we define this as not simply an incarceration issue of criminal behavior on the part of, you're right, it's an institutional thing, it's systemic. And we always come back to talking about criminal behavior. That's not what it's about. Mass incarceration is not about criminal behavior. It's about a policy that has been put into place, the same as they did during enslavement, during segregation, Jim Crow segregation. Now we have another major policy of oppression that's defined, in colorblind terms as being mass incarceration. But that's exactly what we're talking about. Something that's systemic, that's institutionalized,
Okay.
that's structural.
All right, we have a movie we have people here that want to see the movie. We want to continue the conversation. If you want to continue the conversation, let's go in the other room. If you want to leave your name and email and phone number, we would begin to continue this dialogue and call more opportunities to assemble.